So as a bit of review, what we did yesterday, we went through part 1 of this. And in part 1, we talked about what an API was. We talked about what a REST API was. I broke away from the article. We talked about CRUD. And I showed you an article on REST API as well. All right. As it says in there, all the documents and information to be shared are called resources. So basically any page you want to bring up is referred to as a resource. We talked about what the main features, the main functionality of CRUD was. I'm not going to say that again. We've done this many times. All right. And we've already got all this stuff, so there was nothing new we had to add there. So we created the empty project folder. We also went in and first created an associated GitHub repository that we could put the project in. We did our npm init. We went in and we set up the folder structure as shown right there. And one thing to realize when you look at this is what we have right now is we have one controller and one model. Even though I told you that when you created the folder to call them controllers and models, because my hope was we could get this to work. And then what I was going to ask you to try to do was to add an author's controller, an author's model, and also to add a publisher's controller and a publisher's model. All right, and that would pretty much put working with MySQL to bed here. All right, we did the DB connection where we put in all of our database information. We did not call ours index.js, we called it server.js, and when we went in and added these 3 packages, those being Express, MySQL, and the body parser, we then got our package.json file, which looked like this. We also went in, even though it wasn't in here, and we added node mod. All right. Then we went in and we just created a skeletal version, basically, of our server.js file. My hope is that by now there's nothing in here. I know I keep harping on say const not var, but there shouldn't be anything in here that people have questions on. I mean, that stuff that's in there should make sense to everyone. All right. So we brought it up, and we actually did go in. We didn't use Postman again. You can use Postman. There's not a problem with it, and there's other things that other tools like this too. In fact, the 2 that are best known are Postman and one, I love the name of this, Insomnia is what it's called. And they all work pretty much the same way. You can go and download versions of them for free. I even mentioned with Postman yesterday that you can either go out to postman.com or wherever it was, or you can even download it as a Chrome extension. And both ways it works pretty much like this. And ideally, at least again yesterday, what you saw pretty much was this. Now, you have to typically put more information in when you use Postman, where a lot of it, again, is defaulted for you when you use the Thunder client. That said, there's nothing wrong with it. Now, when you look up on the screen here, you saw this in Thunder client as well, but this, the get means you're doing a select. So again, you're going to either get all records or one record. You put in the URL, all right, and the port number. And you can either say http://localhost:/port number/ or http://127.0.0.1 port number. And the reason I think that they allow you to do both is actually in sometimes in some packages, I think they expect you to put in the loopback address, which is 127.0.0.1. We did that, and we saw that it did come up and say, welcome to BIMS. All right. Like this. That's pretty much what all of ours said. So, again, we got that done. Then we jumped into part 2, as it says, where we created a modularized project using the MVC architecture. We'll also learn how to perform CRUD operations. Then in part 3, that was basically doing the testing. All right. So jumping then into part 2, which we did second. All right, make it a little smaller. There we go. So this was the idea, that we would hopefully be able to do this by the time we started testing. So to do the get, we would just put in the, HTTP:/localhost //localhost :port number /book/, and that would get all books. Putting in the same thing with an ID on it would allow us to get an ID. And to save, this is the C part of CRUD, of course. All right, to create a new one. So again, it would be /book, probably /, but it would be, instead of being a get type, it would be a post type. And the update and the delete both required an ID, because again, the idea behind this was to either update a single book or to delete a single book rather than all books. All right, we used a database that was a little bit different than his. Hopefully that's not going to matter in the main scheme of things. I don't know why it would, because we had more stuff than he did. All right, but we did go back and changed so that our title now, we have a title ID for our titles, and that was our primary key. And we moved down, so we've got title ID, and we had the ISBN, and the title, and the publisher ID, and the copyright, and the edition number, and we had the price. Maybe not in that order, but those are the fields that we had. All right, so our table structure did not look identical to this, but our stuff pretty much was identical to it. Then we went in and made the database configuration file. There are different ways of doing this. As we go through, you're going to see that there are different ways of doing this. All right. One thing that's about this is, and I think I mentioned this to you before, typically DB connection is one of the files that you would have to go and download with your project. All right. Well, the reason I'm telling you that is, notice what's in here: the name of the user and the password. All right. That's not good. You don't want to share that information. So typically we would put this into another file that would be in our .gitignore file so that other people wouldn't be able to see it. That makes no sense. Just bear with me, because we're going to be doing that kind of stuff as we go on. All right. Then we went in and we defined the data model. This was probably the hardest part of the thing that we went through yesterday. And again, I realized it doesn't, about as good as I can get it right there. All right. So DB, that was our connection to the dbconnection.js file, as it says. Then we created a new book object and what was inside of there. All right. This is JSON that's in here. So we've got get all books. We changed everything that says function in here. We changed each one of them to an arrow function. So the idea with get all books was it was supposed to return this query, which was select everything from book. Now ours wasn't from book order, of course. Ours was from titles. All right. And then order by title ID, descending order. All right. Then we had getting a single title, which again for us was select star from titles, where title ID =?. And again, that question mark is put in there as a placeholder. All right. Then we have the delete, as it says, delete from book where book ID equals, and again, that's the ID as a placeholder. The update's different because with the update, typically when you use a put like this, which is what we use, it assumes that you're updating everything. So we passed it the entire book object in. This one, if you notice, also has two question marks. So that first question mark is going to be replaced by book. The second question mark should be replaced by the ID that we pass in. And then the last thing that was in here was to create a brand new book. All right, so whereas this is book capital B, this is book lowercase b in here. So we're creating an object in here. And again, ours was different because it had the ISBN, it had the title, and all those other fields I mentioned before. And then we, again, tried to come in here and say insert into book set. Now, a couple of questions. First of all, I get all this. And this is a placeholder, and you put it in brackets. And the reason that you put it in brackets like this is because you can have more than one thing. So it's an array. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Now, why isn't that one in brackets? I don't know. I thought that it should be, but I believe that when I tried to put it in brackets, that it gave me an error message. I could be wrong, but I thought that it did. All right. So this is, again, our attempt at inserting a new book into or a new title into the titles table. Then at the end, so if you have a file that you are creating that you want to be able to provide information that you can share and bring into other files, then notice we called this book and we called this DB, all right, and we did the module.exports of book here, all right, and what that means is we would then be able to bring that in to other files. So they didn't give much of an explanation. I know I gave more than they did. All right. So then the next thing that we had to do, as it says, was so the other one was our book model. This is our book controller. All right. And if we do get to the point, God knows I hope we do, where we can get this to work, and you do add two more, you're going to have in all three of the ones, so in the book controller, in the titles in the titles controller, in the or book, whatever we called it. And so in that controller, in the publisher's controller, and in the author's controller, you will have these first two lines. The third line will be different in each one because you will create one for authors and one for publishers. Again, it will be modeled after the stuff that's in the book model. All right. So it says now let's define our endpoints with code implementation. So there's 5 different endpoints. Insert a single new book, retrieve all books, retrieve a single book, update a single book, and delete a single book. All right. It is possible there are other verbs, which are what these are referred to, that you can use other than these. These are the ones you're probably going to use well over 90% of the time. All right. So as it says, any book entry will be saved to our database through this endpoint. All right. This is where, as it says, we bring in the body parser module. All right. It parses and processes the data. In other words, it separates everything out because in the request.body, it's kind of lumped all together and we're breaking it apart into the pieces. All right. And as it says, it will then call the create new book. Well, where's the create new book? That create new book was right here. So it's calling this. I'm not going to buzz back and forth, but for the update that we'll see in a minute, it's going to call update book. For the delete we'll see in a minute, it'll call the delete book. For the get all titles, it'll call get all, it will call the get books. For the get with just a single one, it'll call the get book by ID. So this was the one that's in here. So in other words, ideally, what we'll be able to do in just a minute is we will be able to create a post request. All right. So it'll be of type post. We will put in the http://localhost : whatever our port number was, 3333 or whatever it was, /book/. That's not going to be enough. If we put that in, the system needs to know, well, okay, you're going to do a create. What do you want to create? So we're going to have to go into Thunder Client and we're going to have to put that information in there for the new book that we want to put in as parameters. If you don't understand that, we're going to do it together in just a minute, okay? So that'll be that one. Then next, we've got the get all books. All right, so again, ideally, to get this to work, we're going to be able to put in http://localhost : port number / and that should give us this, as long as we've set the router type to get. All right, remember the router type on this one was post. All right, when we do that and we add an ID afterwards, all right, then we should be allowed to get or be able to get a single book. All right. And then finally, when we're updating or deleting, again, it's one at a time. And notice that in both cases, as it says, it should take that ID from the request parameter. All right. And if it works, it'll return the JSON response upon completion. So why would you do this? Well, you put it, one thing you don't want to change in here is the ID. All right, because that ID is the primary key. Once the primary key is set, it's not even that you better have a darn good reason to change it. You really should never change it for any reason. All right, but we could come in and want to change any of those other fields in our titles table. Again, there were like 6 or 7 different fields. All right, and then finally, this is probably the simplest because there's nothing special we have to do. We just have to set the type to delete, http://localhost:/port number/book/ID number. And like that, when we press it, it should be gone. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I had problems with this yesterday. So I got some of it to work easy and some of it did not. So everybody is to this point. Am I correct? Yes? All right. So that puts us to part 3 of the series, which is this one. All right. So building, part 3. It says this article is part of the ongoing series. In part 1, they set up a project folder and the environment. In part 2, we set up the REST API endpoints. In this one, we're going to verify or test the correctness of the API endpoints implemented in the previous article. Now, like I said, I had some problems with this. I don't think it had anything at all to do with, I didn't try this under Postman, but I don't think it had anything at all to do with ThunderClient. Was I screwing up? It sure is possible, because I don't know if I was, what I did wrong. So it says we basically covered all the necessary parts of the project. We only need to put all the pieces together. To do so now, open the index.js file and update it with the content above. So even before we do that, let's look at what's in here. All right. We've already got lines 9, 10, and 11. I believe those are in here already. Again, yours say const. We've got line 14 in here already. So what's new? Well, we've got three or four different lines that we didn't have in here before. Those are between line 16 and line 23. All right. Line 16, of course, is a comment. Line 17 tells us that we want to use the body parser and we want it to be able to produce JSON for us. JavaScript object notation. Line 18, these two go together. All right. And again, notice he uses true, I've used false. I tried it both ways and I had problems with it. But this is allowing us to basically parse what we're putting into that object and break it off into pieces. This says we want to be able to use the book controller that we defined up there. All right. This we've already got. So what I'm going to do is in here, I'm going to bring up my server.js file that we've got in here right now. I'm going to cut down the size of this. I'm going to move it over. All right. I don't want it. All right. And there we go. Okay. So I put the path in just in case it was needed. We've got Express here. We've got body parser here. We've got MySQL here. Now, we probably won't need the MySQL here anymore because it is in the book model. All right. But it doesn't hurt to leave it in there. It's not going to hurt anything. So I'll just leave it in there. And later on, if we get this to work, I'll pull it out and try it again. And if it, you shouldn't have stuff in there really that you don't need. Okay. All right. And same thing with the path. We may not need the path. So I'm going to come down here and notice the first thing it's got is const book controller. Is that what we called it? I'm not sure. Looks like it's book controller from right there. So I'm going to put in book controller equals, let me make sure this is word wrapped. It's now. All right, so const book controller equals require. Now, just so you know, this is a little free for lack of better words. Unix or Linux. Dot means the current directory. So when you say /, you're saying from wherever this file is. This file is located in our BIMS folder. All right, folder or directory, they basically mean the same thing. So what we're saying is, okay, we're in this directory /, but we want to go to the controllers directory. Why? Because what's in there is our book controller. All right. Does it make sense to everybody as far as what we're doing? So we're telling it, this book controller, we want to be able to use it. All right. And we are telling it where it lives, for lack of better words. All right. Okay. So we've got that. Const app equal express. We got our const port. But before we do that app get, let's go in and put in the other stuff that's shown here. Again, you can put in the comments. You don't have to. This says use the body parser. And app.use body parser.json. And app.use body parser .url encoded, and that's got an extended. They say true. I thought it was false. I don't think it really seems to matter. Again, I've told you this before, that body parser has been deprecated. That's why we get that line through it. It's not that it can't be used. It's not that it doesn't work. All right. So then finally, I'm going to put in there use the controller. I'm just going to say use the book controller. All right, so app.use book _ controller. All right, and that should be everything. So let me make this bigger. And if you notice now, path is not being used in MySQL, but before this was grayed out, it's not anymore, because it is being used. Before this was grayed out, all right? But we've got all that in there. So we added line 4. I think we already had line 5. We already had lines 1 to 4. So I added line 5. I added on mine, if you're using the same numbering that I am, I added lines 13 through 18, which included a blank line and 2 comments. All right. Everybody up to that point? Everybody is caught up, etc. All right. Sometimes I get the feeling that I rush through this stuff faster than would be, so I'm trying to slow it down today. I've got one student in the morning class who doesn't seem like he types very well. And I have other students in that class making faces at me because I keep slowing down so that person can catch up. All right. I don't know how you fix that. I've told them about typing tutors and the like, but whatever. All right. So, that's not what I want. That is. All right, so we've got this. All right. Start the node server by running node index relative to your project folder. Okay. So you already know how to do this. I've got this up, I've got it up and running, but I do not have my server up and running. I had everything in the world on yesterday, so I basically closed down just about everything. So that was BIMS. So I'm going to right mouse click on BIMS and do my git bash here. Then I'm going to come in and do my npm run dev. All right, and you can see it crashed. Okay, so it says this is one thing I don't understand about this, because unless I reboot the system, even though I closed it down, it thinks that 3000 is still being used. So How do I fix that? I have to change mine. I'm not saying you have to change yours, but I've got to go back in here, and in my server.js file, I just have to change it to something I haven't used before. So I'll put in here 3, 4, 5, 6. You don't have to do that. If yours works, keep it where it is. If you get the same error that I did, then you'll have to change it to something else. And again, to my knowledge, you can put in any number in there between 3,000 and 99.99. All right? All right. So once I did that, hopefully, okay, now it's giving me something else. It's okay, because I'll have to just keep doing some debugging in here, okay? So we put that in. So now it's saying requires app.use requires a middleware function. All right, so we'll go back and look at that in just a minute. So it's letting me know where it's finding the problem. It's at server.js on line 18 for me in column 5. So let's take a look at what's there. All right, so column 18, that's this. It doesn't like that app.use book controller that's in there. All right. First thing to do is make sure everything looks okay, and that, as far as I can tell, it does. You do not put the .js in there. All right. So, but as far as I know, the path and everything is correct. Controllers, book controller, .js, so that's all okay. All right. And I'm going to go back and take a look at what that author had said. Book controllers require, that's all the same. And I believe I had the same error. I'm trying to figure out what I did to fix it because I got further than this. Okay, I think what I did was I grabbed the error, copied it to the clipboard, and Googled it. All right. All right, this says the module.exports equal router in the routes.js. Now, as far as I know, that was put in there, but I'm going to look anyway. So I'm going to go back to my file, my books controller, and see if at the bottom, no, I didn't. So I need a module.exports equal router right there. And the reason I need that is router is what it's going to be referring to basically back in the other file. And that name right here, that name, router, should be the same name as the name we used up here. All right? You don't have to call it router, but by convention, most people do. All right? So this is in your bookcontroller.js file at the bottom. Put module.exports. Then another thing, when I did this, and don't ask me why, when I did it the other day, I put export and not exports. You get an error when you do that because it doesn't recognize basically the module, the module here does not recognize a method called export. All right, so I've got that in. I'm going to save. I'm going to go back to here. And I don't know if it crashed again, so we'll look. I'm going to clear this and try it again. And now it's running. Okay? Hopefully you are right where I am. And if you're not, I want to wait because I want everybody to catch up. I want us to all be together here. Properly initialized. Again, we've got to look for the one that's your file that's in here. So one of these should be yours. So it's controller, it's your book controller on line 4. It's dot, not. Oh, wait a minute. Wait. Let's double check. This is in your book controller file, right?
Yes.
It is done. So that is done. All right. Model. I don't see anything different that I have, etc. You did put that at the bottom of your program, right? Okay, that's fine.
It's running
That.
everything. Well, no, until we added everything today. I checked it at the beginning of class.
Gotcha. All right. Can you go back to here? In fact, let's just do this. Stop it. Clear it and run it again. Saying it doesn't make this line publisher ID fields. In your book model, line 27. So let's look at your book model. Okay, you need a colon there, not an equal sign, so there should be a colon there. All right, save it and go back to it. Now, there could be other stuff, it's possible. All right, so you did the same thing with price. I guess we should have looked. Hopefully that fixed it. You already did. Okay. Anybody else? So everyone's is running?
Tell me, I just already, what's that thing?
If you get that, just go back to your server.js file and choose a different port number. The other way you can get around that is to reboot the machine. But what I just told you is a faster way than rebooting. Now, if I get into that, run into that problem again, where it's going to crash and it tells me that again, then I got to go back in and change it yet again. Does that make sense? And for some reason, it's not breaking that port connection. It's setting it up, but you would think that if the program stops running, it would give up that port, but evidently it does not. Is yours running now?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. Like I said, I want us all to be at the same place. All right. Okay. That's that one. There we go. All right. So we started the server. We're all right here. That's good. So again, we could use Postman. We're not using Postman. So let's see. This is where I ran into problems the other day. I'm going to see if we still have it or not. Now, it says here we can access our RESTful API using this. Now, you will have to replace that with your port number, but after you put that in, don't hit enter. Remember, this has got to look like this. So let's just take a quick look at it. So I'm going to jump over in here, and I'm going to bring up a, whoops, wrong one. This is for the morning class. All right, so I'm going to bring up a Thunder client session right here. I'm going to click New Request. All right. And again, it says we should put in here HTTP, and I think it's HTTP, not PS, because we haven't provided the secure link. All right, so localhost 3456 / but it's not a get. All right, we're trying to do an order here, so this will be a post. Now, it's still not done because there's nothing to post. Does that make sense to everyone? Now, we should not have to set up the title ID. We should not have, because that's already in there. So I'm going to come over to, and I'm going to click where it says the word parameter. I'm going to click right there, and I'm going to type in ISBN, because that's the first field we have. Then I'm going to hit tab. Now, I'm going to put in 978 dash, and I'll put in about 8 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Notice when you look up on top what it's putting in there now. You see that, how it's adding it? We are building a query string. Remember I said everything that comes after the question mark, technically including the question mark, is the query string. So let's see if I still have that from yesterday. I don't know. Yeah, I do. Good. So these are the fields that we need to put in. So the next one is title. So title. A new, let me move this down so you can see everything that I'm typing in there. A new notebook. You can put anything you want in there. Ideally, if this works, we're going to be putting a new record into the database. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. So that's the second field. Next, we've got edition number. All right, I'll just say 1 because it's the first edition. All right. The field after that is copyright. We're going to assume it's a brand new book, so we'll put 2021 in. Then we've got publisher ID. This is saying which publisher. Remember we had the 7 publishers? All right, so I'll put 6. You can put any one you want. It does, as long as it's 1 to 7, it shouldn't matter. And the last one is price. All right, and make up a price, $33.98. I just made that up. And again, when you take a look over here at the URL that's at the top now, it's got the ISBN that we put in, followed by the title that we put in, followed by the edition number that we put in, followed by the copyright that we put in, followed by the publisher ID that we put in, followed by the price that we put in. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, now, in an ideal world, after we do this and we click send, we should get a 200 status here, meaning that it worked. And because I want to go back, because I want you to understand what's going on here. Okay, so what should be happening, let me go back to our book controller. All right, and it should see, oh, you're doing a post, right? Yeah. So it should go back and call that create book from our books model and create new book. So it should say, okay, the ISBN is what we just put in, the title, etc. So we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fields. All right. And then it should attempt to insert that into the database. All right. At which time it'll jump back into here and it'll say, okay, if we do that, but if we get an error code that it's a duplicate entry, we get this error. Otherwise, if it's a different error, we're going to get internal server error. If we get down to here, that means it worked. So if it worked, the affected rows should be 1. We affected 1 row because we attempted to put in 1 book. So there is no error, so we set error to false, and we have a message that should come up that says title successfully inserted. All right. Now, when I did this yesterday, oops, back, sorry about that. When I did this yesterday, come on, there we go. And I went back to, well, which one do I have running here? Don't need that one running anymore. When I clicked it, it gave me an error. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got all 6 fields. They all look, I mean, what do you want to look for here? Well, ISBN and title are strings. So you literally could put almost anything in the world in there you wanted to. Edition number is an integer. So you want to make sure it's a number. Copyright, I believe, is also an integer. Publisher ID, I know, is an integer. And I set price up as a decimal 92, which is a humongo number. Definitely big enough. So if I click send, now let's look at least, because at least this is what I got. All right. It says file not found. So what's the problem? Well, I mean, look at this. It's just saying error. If I click preview, it says cannot post slash. I'm not saying that. That's probably what all of you got. If anybody tried it and it worked, I'd like to know what you did that I didn't do. All right. But for now, let's go on and see how the other ones do or do not work. All right. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change this. Notice as soon as I change this to get, all right, well, last time it did, I'm going to go into there to get, and I'm going to clear out my whole window that's up here. I'm going to clear that whole thing out. All right. And I'm going to put in here http://localhost/ colon 3456 or whatever your port number is, all right, slash. Just that. All right, and I'm going to click send. And we get welcome to BIMS. Well, that ain't good. So what am I missing here? I didn't think I was missing anything. We may, well, let's see, preview. Yeah, welcome to BIMS. Okay. We'll get it working because I know it works. All right. I believe the reason that it didn't work, we'll find out right now, is after this, we need to put in book. It's either book or books. I don't know. There it is. And there's our information. Now, what we should get in here are all 25 of the books. See that? So let's, for lack of better words, let's kind of, yours may be in a different order. It really doesn't matter, okay? But the point is, let's reverse engineer this, so to speak. All right? Yes.
So give me an error saying DB query is not a function in the book model.
Okay, then let's take a look. I see you have the error up. Okay, go back and bring that up again. Okay. Look at something you did that I didn't do. Did anybody else get an error when they did it? Or did, okay. Did you get the same error he got? Okay. Can I see your DB connection file? Okay, change this right here. Change that to DB, the word connection. The word connection on my screen. Make that DB as well. And even though it shouldn't have, put a semicolon. Save it. All right. And let's try it again. So you're already up and running.
There.
I just have the authors and publishers.
Yeah, we've done every title table. That's weird. Well, just go back to the titles I gave you yesterday and put it in.
Okay.
So, yeah, open that up and first put in the schema. Oh, yeah. Select the database first. Just click on the database first, then just paste it back in. Yeah, it may have actually created it,
Oh, okay.
but it also says there's 25 rows in it. So now it's exists. I'll tell you what, I don't know, that's goofy, but go back to an SQL window and say drop table titles. And run that. Are you sure? Yes. Okay, now go back to your empty SQL window. And paste that in, see if it lets you. See if it takes it now. Okay, now go back to the other one, Atlas Writers back in. This is personally one reason I don't really like using my SQL with this, because I've run into stuff, weird stuff like that, that makes absolutely no sense. Let's see if I fixed it. So refresh the database here. That's weird.
I noticed that yesterday, like, it showed up down here, that it had it, but then over
Well,
here-
right now, type in here, show tables. And then run it. It's showing it there. Well, go ahead and go back into your program and go back into where you got your thundercloud running. And well, it's 12:57. Let's take our first break. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, what you can do, I don't know why you have to do this. You've done nothing wrong, but you might want to drop the whole database that you created during the break. I don't see anything that you did that was wrong. Nothing. All right. If everybody would just take a quick look up here, though, I'm going to come back to here where I just was. All right. And in fact, where are we here? So this gave us everything, right? Well, notice in here I've got my IDs. Now, I put this in already, so mine aren't going to be the same as yours. I think I put mine in twice, see, it's like you were saying. So, for instance, here's 33. Would you agree? That's the title ID right there. So I'm going to put in here 33 and click send. And why is it giving me a type here? Books by ID. Oh, jeez Louise. Because in mine, nobody caught that, including me. No, it's my fault. In my book model, somewhere in here, either in here or in the other one, I called it get book by IDs instead of ID. There it's right.
Well, it should say book file messed up on.
There it is, right there. See that? I put an S in there. Save. Let's go back and make sure I didn't break anything. Yeah, it's still running. Notice it did give me there. It's telling me right there. You're right. I could have gone and done it that way. All right. So I'm going to go back into here into my new request. Got that in there, and I'm going to send it again. There's book 33. So the create works. All right. But I want Angie to be able to catch up with us. She's doing nothing wrong, but for whatever reason, she's put her titles table in twice, and the system refuses to recognize the table. All right.
Mine just keeps processing. It won't throw an error or anything. Keep processing.
What do you mean when you say it just keeps processing? You know, it's
So when I hit send on the
oh,
it just
it doesn't do anything?
No.
Okay, well then we'll take a look at that too. All right, so I'm going to stop a little bit early. It's 50 minutes, but that's okay.